Hi, everyone. For this week's conversation, I was able to speak with Brian Patterson. Brian is a Cayman-based Bermudian by nationality corporate offshoring expert, crypto counsel, and lawyer. With the current implosion of FTX and the crypto industry kind of shaky, I thought it would be prudent to speak with someone at the heart of the nexus between crypto, the Caribbean, international banking, tax compliance, regulation, the whole jazz. I hope you find it interesting, and for those who aren't familiar with FTX and the current implosion, I recommend reading the primers I posted in the show notes before listening. Thanks. I really wanted to talk to you because, one, you're an attorney, and two, you're based in the Caribbean, and three, you're not American, and four, you're my cousin, so maybe I can ask questions. The FTX scandal seems to be imploding and being a black hole. But one of the things I was most curious, I have no exposure to it, but I was particularly interested in what an attorney in your line of work thinks about this all. But before we start, why don't you give everyone just a quick bio of who you are and where you are
Sure.
and what you do.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thanks very much, Robert. Brian Patterson, senior corporate counsel. It's in the Cayman Islands. And so we cover just about everything. And Cayman Islands is an offshore jurisdiction, which is, I guess, shorthand for we're not supposed to say no tax. We're supposed to say neutral tax or low tax these days. And so there is no income tax, capital gains, dividend tax, that sort of thing here. Same as Bermuda, where I come from originally. Both those jurisdictions are quite busy with international corporate work. So I do corporate work, not litigation work, although there is quite a bit of litigation work that is thrown up by some of the corporate stuff that we put in place. But large corporate deals come through the Cayman Islands all the time. And so I'm able to participate, take, get a fair bit of work coming without even having to advertise much. People come to us rather than us having to go to them. So that's just a bit of my background. Anything missing, Robert? Let me know.
So let's talk about the FTX implosion. What's the water cooler conversation in the Cayman Islands about this situation?
Well, it's it's a big deal, obviously, for anybody who's in financial services or financial markets. But there is definitely a line to be drawn between those who are involved in crypto, and many of them are deep into it, and those who have nothing to do with crypto and are watching from the other side of the fence. And so there isn't really much of a middle ground. And those who aren't involved aren't really, they read the news and they see the numbers and they think Enron and that sort of thing. But, as we saw, the fellow who has taken over at FTX, Jack Ray, he helped bring Enron through its insolvency. And his first comments were, he has seen nothing like the level of failure, the degree of failure in the compliance, accounting, KYC type of information that is coming out of his initial couple of days review of the financials and infrastructure of FTX. So that does not bode well. the crypto market in general, for most people, is not very well regulated. And so for some people, for unscrupulous people, that they see as an advantage, an opportunity. And so for us here in the Cayman Islands, I do the crypto work for our company, for my office. A lot of the other guys won't touch it because they're not familiar with it. They don't know about it. But when I say I do crypto work, what I do is help crypto clients set up their companies under the crypto regulation here in the Cayman Islands. We are managed by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, CIMA for short, and they put in place a couple of years ago a quite robust regulation for virtual asset service providers, VASP, so VASP for short. And there are probably 10 to 15 regulated VASP entities in the Cayman Islands now who have gone through very in-depth KYC, which stands for Know Your Client, due diligence on the directors, the shareholders, the experience, the knowledge of these people who are setting up companies to assist with virtual assets, be that exchange or outright sale or custody, any business to do with virtual assets. So those kinds of regulations are in place. In a place like the Cayman Islands, you have the British Virgin Islands, which is sister jurisdiction, similar no tax jurisdiction, but their regulations, they have regulations, but they're a little less robust. So there's a few exemptions that VASPs can use there. And so more often than not, we might put the crypto business in the Virgin Islands with a holding company in the Cayman Islands. Gives the client the best of both worlds. As you mentioned at the beginning, U.S. versus non-U.S. There's a big discussion, ongoing discussion in the U.S. about regulation. Is crypto a security? Is it a commodity? How is it to be regulated? Well, it's not yet regulated, and so you end up with these types of FTX situations with $50-odd billion worth of assets tied up or lost by hopeful, if unsuspecting, clients of that particular exchange.
Brian, how would you compare the Bahamian regulatory framework and jurisdiction to the Cayman and to other ones?
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. So Bahamas, as you know, is an independent nation. They went independent quite some time ago, had a rough time of it for a while, and have been building themselves up, selling themselves as an offshore jurisdiction. But they don't have the infrastructure or the same rule of law that we might have in the Cayman Islands. Cayman, Bermuda, and BVI are all British overseas territories. So we have common law, we have statute law, but we are governed by, and any client or counterparty here has a right of appeal to the Privy Council in London, the highest court in the British group of in the British Isles and its overseas territories. So that gives a lot of comfort to anybody who's coming to those places. Bahamas does not have that sophisticated type of legal structure. It's recognized as an offshore jurisdiction. They are certainly better than what they used to be, but setting up in a place like that probably requires less due diligence and less strict actions and activities. I think there is a Bahamas Securities Administration or some sort of an entity of that nature. I've seen them named in some of the articles, but I don't know anything about them. We don't have much to do with Bahamas. We have an affiliate company affiliate law firm that if we have a Bahamian matter, we'll go to those guys and take their instruction. But in my crypto dealings and in my corporate dealings, there is not a whole lot of interaction with the Bahamas. So it could be said that it is not as sophisticated or as developed a jurisdiction as some of the other ones mentioned.
Do you think that was purposely chosen, or, I mean, it's impossible to know their intentions, but would you have advised an exchange to fund themselves and base themselves?
No, I would not have, but, my clients and my approach is to make the best of what's in front of us in terms of, there's a balance between regulation, reputation, authority, and cost. So sometimes a place like Cayman, it's more expensive to and Bermuda, it's more expensive to operate, but you have a high degree of regulation and reputation. BVI, a little less expensive, but you still have good regulation and reputation. Bahamas is definitely a choice for those who want to set up without having to go through as strict a process. My sense is that they may have set up there initially because it was a little easier, a little more, entrepreneurially friendly, but I don't think they realized how big and how busy FTX would get. That was it just skyrocketed within a couple of years with the system, the ecosystem, the offering that they had in place, the contacts. And so the reasons for choosing Bahamas at the beginning, if FTX wanted to, let's say a year ago, had grown to such a size, if there were concerns, the opportunity would have been to move their domicile, move the company to a different jurisdiction with stronger, better regulations, but they didn't. Whether that was because they were too busy dealing with their success, I'm not sure. But
it just seems troublesome when the father of the CEO and the father of Sam Bankman-Fried are both legal regulatory experts in U.S. law.
It's unusual. Yeah, whether that means that they're getting some sort of special secret advice or whether that means they don't talk to their parents at all, I'm not sure. But you would have thought that there would be some kind of my thought is, and I'm projecting my own perspective. Oh, listen, son, you need to consider your reputation and your jurisdiction choice versus what someone else may think. Oh, son, if you're considering something, listen, let me tell you where to go, where you can make it the easiest way to go. And which of those, I guess, as you say, we're not quite sure.
How do you think this is going to play out legally? The jurisdictional challenges just seem profound. They're filing bankruptcy in the U.S. and
It's
Bahamas.
crazy.
So just walk me through where you think this is.
So there are, I think it was 150 companies or 100 companies that were involved in as aspects of the group of companies. in a bunch of different jurisdictions globally. But what's happening now is bankruptcy in the primary jurisdiction in the U.S. And so bankruptcy, again, I'm a corporate lawyer, not a litigation lawyer. It's the litigation guys who would be involved there. But for instance, my firm has acted quite quickly and last week put out a memorandum, which I've sent to you, Robert. You would have seen, describing the case that's going to be or preparation for the bankruptcy proceedings, and gathering claimants, gathering people who have lost or whose funds are locked up, because now that it's in bankruptcy, it's being monitored, managed by the government, by the liquidators. Everybody has to line up and make their claim for what they say they're owed, prove their claim, and then get a percentage, divide up whatever's left amongst the claimants pro rata. Whether they'll get 50 cents on the dollar, 1 cent on the dollar, or less, we're not quite sure yet.
Do you think there's evidence of regulatory capture in the Bahamas?
Of regulatory
capture?
What do you mean by that?
Well, FTX and SBF, or the founders, seem to make donations to strategic regulatory bodies and media bodies. So I'm just curious how you find that playing in or not, or I'm just concerned, how does the Bahamas actually create, or how does the Cayman's regulatory bodies not get in bed with the...
Oh my God. You here in Cayman or Bermuda, I mean, working here, you might go out for lunch with someone that you work with at the monetary authority in Bermuda or Cayman, and you might pay for that lunch. But that's as far as it goes. You're not going to take them out for dinner and their families and put wine on the table, etc. Both those regulatory authorities, by virtue of being in an offshore jurisdiction already, they are both well aware that they need to be extremely careful as to how, both what they do and what they're perceived to do in terms of interaction or favoritism or any kind of involvement with client regulatory issues. So yes, very little of that would happen here. There's certainly no contributions or donations or presence that would be involved. In the Bahamas, I'm not sure, and I haven't actually dug into that yet.
Yeah, from the general, the Twitter mindsphere has become kind of a citizen journalist effort. And they found, images of him with the Ministry of Finance, and they're opening new buildings. And, to them, the FTX was a golden goose that would help prop up the Bahamian kind of crypto market. And then when the exchange closed, they were the first regulatory agents to almost get a backdoor access to pull out their funds.
Right.
So the thing I'm questioning as an attorney, how did all the investors get duped by these people? You have Sequoia and all of these. How is the due diligence? I mean, I call you up and you're already sending me so many red flags. One, they're the Bahamas. Two, they don't know.
Right.
But what's your take on this?
So for instance, I have a couple of crypto clients who have decided to set up here in the Cayman Islands for all the reasons listed before. They are, very smart, very sensible, very risk averse, and they are, it's crypto blockchain business. There's a lot of volatility, more volatility than almost anything. But these guys, and I've watched them over the course of years, these guys are very careful with what they do and what they get involved in. Luna and the Terra precursor to this, they stayed well away from. FTX, they had no exposure to. Their they make decisions based on their own very sensible views. Now, that means sometimes they're ignoring potential profit, potential revenue, potential, exponential returns. The average person, let alone the average institution, when they see the kinds of returns, exponential returns that are theoretically possible because of the volatility of crypto and because of the whatever is being touted by the founders of some of these firms, they can't resist. And unfortunately, you might want to say their mercenary instincts overcome their moral instincts. And that leads to this kind of situation.
How do you expect Sam Bankman-Fried? Do you think there's going to be criminal aspects, or how do you think this is going to pan out for them? He seems, he's still talking to the press and he's responding to questions, and it just seems he's not as nervous as he should be.
No, exactly. For someone who is that, where some of the commentators have noted, he was worth 26 billion a couple of years ago, 20 billion at the beginning of this year, 10 billion a couple of weeks ago, and absolutely zero now. He does not seem to be fazed. And whether that's because he's, really emotionally disconnected, or, he's got, he's looked after himself in some way. I'm not quite sure. That's just financially. In terms of consequences for his actions, I'm not sure how far it'll go. I mean, it depends on whether it's you would imagine it would go as far as, there's jail time to be paid for the degree of fraud and the degree of mismanagement of client funds, misappropriation of client funds. He moved them from FTX to Alameda, about $4 billion. That was not his money. But see, then when you got this whole structure that's propped up by the collateralized by the FTT, his own token, which is made up money, it just, from any sort of sensible crypto perspective, that doesn't make sense. But that didn't seem to deter all of these folks who are now in the unfortunate situation are not able to have access to their funds, if ever.
Well, the conspiracy theory is that this was all done on purpose to implode the crypto market and lead to what's known as central bank digital currencies. Because the second this imploded, there's talk now in the US about the need for heavy regulation, for really cranking down on that. So it is interesting that Sam Bankman-Fried's father is literally the expert on regulatory law on the SEC and the Fed and all this. So I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of conspiracies, but I'm curious what you think of, since you're in the crypto space, the central bank digital currencies, if you have any opinion on them.
No, it's it seems a next step in the terms of crypto development globally. There's much more to be done and developed, and the fact that there isn't regulation in place to manage or assist with these kinds of crazy situations, that would seem to beg for some type of regulation, because the parties are obviously not self-regulating. And the bottom line for any of this regulation is to protect the consumer, protect the average person who might want to invest. Institutions who do it, they're supposed to be sophisticated investors. But the reality is that this has happened, whether it was, I mean, it would be a very large and unfortunate experiment if it was done on purpose to create that type of arena for further regulation. I'm not sure whether that's, I think it may be more these guys put something in place. It grew way out of hand for anything that they could have imagined or attempted to regulate far faster than they could. It's
No, it's like to me, it just seems like a Ponzi scheme similar to the Madoff situation.
right.
I just don't understand how you have all these due diligence lawyers analyzing everything and writing $200 million checks and just not even asking questions. And then just the FTX, they're guaranteeing 15% returns with no risk. They kept saying no risk. It just seems so outrageous.
Yeah. Exactly. That statement on its own, 15% return with no risk. How is that possible? That's a statement made by the offerors, the owners, their own perception of no risk, and how that's received by the buying public is an entirely different matter. And it's that distinction that the court, I imagine, will look at, focus on, and count the numbers and find them severely wanting in terms of how they manage the whole process.
Yeah, because at least with the Madoff Ponzi, it seems like he had just false records with the accounting. But here, according to the Enron CEO, it just seems like they had nothing in place.
Yeah, he listed off a bunch of issues that were not being managed, and that would seem to be potentially could be laid at the feet of the Bahamas regulatory system, because that would not have happened in Cayman or BVI. It's in other words, they would have had to have hidden things from the regulators in order to get that far. In Bahamas, it didn't seem like they had to hide anything. They just did what they wanted, and were able to operate with such loose controls. I mean, it's like a race car, and nobody's doing up the lug nuts on the tires, or making sure the gas tank doesn't leak, or making sure that there's a seatbelt. It's just thrown together with no protections and set out at high speed. Not a recipe for disaster, in fact.
How do you think this affects just the general image of the Caribbean as kind of a wild banking place?
I mean, from where I sit in the Cayman Islands, I don't think it affects us that much. It's more of a commentary on the crypto business, which we are quite conservative on here. But Caribbean in general, it's Bahamas. I think everybody knows Bahamas I shouldn't say everybody. I believe that the general perspective is the Bahamas is a bit of a Wild West situation. You can do things there that you couldn't do in other places. Cayman, BVI, Bermuda are, blue chip offshore jurisdictions with strong regulation, a history of strong regulation, rule of law, common law, statutory in place. So we continue to do business. None of my regular clients, non-crypto clients, have even whispered that they are concerned about their choice of jurisdiction as a result of the FTX stuff.
Do you think this will have any relational change with the US government or the overreach that they sometimes have on fiscal matters worldwide?
I'm not sure how they would be able to. I mean, we've got the FATCA rules in place where we can't, we have to identify and advise every U.S. Person about their involvement in businesses here. But the U.S. can put in place its crypto regulation. We have ours already. I guess the crypto decentralized autonomous organizations, the whole DAO ethos is decentralized. There's so one of the interesting things, when you set anybody up in you got to go through your forms, and the forms have drop-down lists. And those drop-down lists, there's a standard one that you've seen before to identify the jurisdiction of incorporation, jurisdiction of business. Well, all these crypto guys, there is no jurisdiction. You're looking for global or other when these guys come in and there's some kind of business, because they are outside of these types of jurisdictional, unless and until they put a company in place, it is decentralized and non-jurisdictionally based. So most of them will make sure they keep out of the U.S. because of the U.S. Issues and extraterritorial reach. But putting a company in Cayman or Singapore and then operating worldwide is not really an issue, and will continue to operate like that.
Are you optimistic, pessimistic on the future of crypto?
Oh, optimistic. I mean, like 3 years ago, I would not have been. I would have said, yes, this seems like a sensible development, and it'd be interesting to see how it plays out. So, put the regulation in place here, and my practice here is I've been the lawyer most interested in finding out and learning about it, and the types of clients that I meet and watch how they operate. I think there is definitely an area of this is an area to watch that will expand. It hasn't taken full shape yet. The benefits of blockchain versus the volatility of cryptocurrency, those are two different aspects. And I think there are and will be continued benefits and improvements in the crypto space altogether.
Where do you feel that the center of the crypto world is? Is it Asia? Is it Japan? Is it the US still? I'm just curious where you feel like the energy shifting.
Singapore has been one of the early adopters with regulation, and quite a few crypto entities basing themselves there. So Cayman Islands is becoming another one. It's kind of funny. Cayman and Bermuda, Singapore, the banks will deal with it there. U.S. doesn't have the regulation, and there are a couple of banks that will deal with crypto. Cayman and Bermuda both have crypto regulation, allowing companies to be virtual asset service providers, but no banks will touch it. The banks are still very old school, risk averse. They like their mutual funds money and their institutional investors. Crypto is far too volatile for them. So it's the different jurisdictions and the different types of business, or the different aspects of crypto, some of which involve, somewhere, somehow, you have to switch, crypto to fiat. And who's going to do that, and how are you going to do that? There's a bunch of clients that are making good money off of that, because a bunch of the banks won't do it yet.
Do you ever have conversations with the banks, or do they ask for advice?
Oh yeah, I mean, we've tried. We get eager clients who will come and say, "Well, yeah, I'm doing something very easy and very simple, and I will tell the bank, and they will help me. And we say, okay, go for it. You know, I can introduce you, but Cayman banks are not ready. Bermuda has a bank. There's a bank that's set up, but not yet given authority to operate. And supposedly they are a crypto bank. The government allowed them to set up, but hasn't given them. I don't quite understand what's happening there, but it's not yet. It's not operating yet. So you know they're partway there, but not all the way.
Got it. Do you have any experience with Chinese customers or any area from their totalitarian kind of states and how they're using crypto?
I have a lot of India in order to be considered to remain as a and be considered as a law firm worth dealing with a reputation would not be able to deal with Russian clients. Now, other law firms in India, as you say, would take a different stance.
Yeah, it just seems like it created a whole arbitrage for middlemen to just continue the business.
Yes,
like all so. Because the Russian oil is still flowing to Europe, it just flows through Turkey or through India, and it just seems like those sanctions failed, in my opinion, and just created a lot of extra profit margins for certain middle countries.
No, that's a consideration for sure.
So I was just curious how that, and then it all plays into the crypto world because, I mean, you saw how that there's evidence now that funds from the U.S. ended up in Ukraine, and those funds then got laundered or filtered into FTX and then back to certain parties in the U.S. or elsewhere.
Yeah.
So it's wild to see that kind of money laundering
to such an extent. Exactly.
What is the future for the next, what do you think for the next few years in the Caribbean or Cayman? And what are you most, I mean, I already asked, you're optimistic, but what do you immediately see? How long do you think this FTX thing will take to pan out? Or
I think it'll take a couple of years, and it will, anything that is any considerations or discussions of regulation will be either will be backed by, look what happened here, look what happened there. Therefore, we need to put regulation in place. And so it will definitely push regulation in the US further and faster, and if not elsewhere. Here in the Cayman Islands, BVI, Bermuda, we don't feel any pressure on our regulatory circumstances, but we would look to we'd be interested to see. Will be interested to see what happens. There are clients, not clients of us, but let's say colleagues. When I know people who have funds tied up and can't get them out. Some of them managed to get them out in the early days because they got a phone call, and some of them did not manage to get the money out. And so they are, eager to know what's happened. So I think there will be a progressively more regulatory approach, and this has certainly sped up that clock.
Interesting. And then one of my last questions, Brian, is you remember the Panama Papers and the that seems to have disappeared. I'm just curious. What were you going to say, Brian?
So the Panama Papers, I mean, it was a list of people who had companies or arrangements in Panama, spreading to all the other places. It's every one of those lists, every one of those connections. Very few of them were fraudulent or illegal. from us in the offshore world, we look at that and we say, oh, that's too bad. That's kind of, unfortunately, is a bit of an invasion of privacy if the people who thought they had, set up their arrangements in a particular way. But, the majority of them were legal under each of the regulations, and the home people, like it was a UK person or a US person. Just the existence of the Panama Papers does not mean that everyone operating offshore is, doing so to hide. They're taking advantage of a jurisdiction that has a different approach to tax and regulation than other jurisdictions do. Jurisdictional arbitrage, if you will. And so, yes, there has not been as much fallout as the original editors or journalists played up when that information first came to light.
Well, the reason I was going to ask is I was like, how does your firms deal with leakage, and how do they also enable or guard against, hacking, and what's the culture of that? And then even government infiltration.
Heavy duty IT protection. Cybersecurity is an issue. I have to watch an hour's worth of cybersecurity, email, internet, stuff every month. Because it's such a large firm, it's a bigger target. We have, there's global IT security systems in place doing everything they can all the time, as well as training people like me or people like the person on our front desk who answers emails with information questions. It's very strongly protected, more so than you would think. If you go down the street to any business it might even be a big business, and their IT protections would not be the same. But because of the nature of the, we have global clients, and so we have to be extremely careful with that.
And then, have you ever experienced? I'm just wondering if governments ever infiltrate these banks or these law firms, or it's just
no. I mean, the government doesn't. The monetary authority, which is a quasi-governmental, the monetary authority as the regulator has the right to inquire, to have make reports, to audit each of those. So if you want to operate in a particular business, and each one is regulated slightly differently, whether it's virtual assets, whether it's mutual funds, whether it's insurance, each of those is regulated by the monetary authority, and they have the right to look in. And no one else does. And whatever they look at, that is also, it's not made public. It's not common knowledge. Now, when they find someone, and occasionally some of the service providers will get fines because they have not maintained their AML procedures, anti-money laundering, know your client, KYC requirements, and they'll get fined. Those fines are made public.
Got it. It just seems like even in the U.S., it's funny how the Caribbean gets such a kind of negative reputation, when I'm sure the KYC procedures in the Caribbean are probably even more sophisticated than the US.
Way more, Robert, way more. Because of our situation as an offshore tax jurisdiction, we're constantly fighting against EU, actually, even more so than the States. The EU has it's just a nightmare in terms of what we have to do when we vet our clients. So much so that when we have American or European clients from whom we have to require certified color passport copies, as well as a recent utility invoice showing your name and residential address, they balk. The Europeans are like, what? you want what from me in order to do business? I'm like, yes, that's what we require. And if you don't provide it, we're not going to take you on as a client. So, if you have a company, we want certified copies of all of the corporate documents, register of directors, register of shareholders, memorandum and articles, the works. So there is, our KYC is considerably stricter than most of the other countries.
It's just interesting, isn't it? Because the U.S. is always, I would say most of the money laundering probably occurs through the U.S.
Yeah, exactly.
Brian, are you on Twitter, or are you on where can people follow you or learn more about your work?
I'm not actually. I'd be happy to take any emails or inquiries through my my email. Probably best to use my home email, which is bjp108@gmail.com. bjp108. And yeah, happy to chat to anyone who's interested or has questions. And if you're interested in corporate work or opportunities or have business in the Cayman Islands, I can assist you.
And then, Brian, is there anything else you're working on outside of the legal work, or anything else you want to share?
Well, I do a lot of diving. I do a lot of yoga. I do meditation. I'm the guy that has one foot in the corporate world and one foot in the holistic and spiritual world. And that's what keeps me balanced, Robert. I'm trying to keep up with you, buddy.
Great.